With that, ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude the inaugural session, we now move into the very first panel discussion of the day, and it deals with the topic, Rising Tide, Navigating the Future of Asian Coastal Cities. A coalition of cities come together to highlight imminent risks and the local best practices to adapt and mitigate sea level rise. I'm going to welcome on stage our distinguished speakers who are going to be joining us for this panel session. Chairing this session is Additional Municipal Commissioner Projects, Shri P. Velrasu. Moderating this session is Associate Professor of Sustainable Built Environment at the University of Cambridge, Dr. Ronita Bardhan. Before I invite the rest of the panel members, there's a little bit that I would like to share with all of you about Shri P. Velrasu. He's an exceptional IAS officer and a beacon of brilliance in his field. As the Additional Municipal Commissioner of the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai, his visionary leadership propels the city towards unprecedented progress. With a master's degree in public policy from UC Berkeley and expertise in agricultural economics, his diverse knowledge fuels innovative solutions. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Requesting Shri P. Velrasu to please join us on stage. I would also like to introduce all of you to our moderator for this session, Dr. Ronita Bardhan. She is the Associate Professor of Sustainable Built Environment at the University of Cambridge, UK. She's an architectural engineer and urban studies educator with PhD in urban engineering. Her research is in the sector of sustainable built environment to inform health and energy decisions in the changing climate and low-income communities. Joining us virtually, requesting all the delegates to kindly settle down. We will be starting with the next panel discussion shortly. In the meantime, I'm going to introduce all of you to the rest of the speakers of this panel. Joining us virtually, ladies and gentlemen, we have Director, Development and Advancement of Resilient Cities Alliance, DVARCA, University of Notre Dame, USA, Dr. Krupali Uplekar, Krusche. She is a distinguished architect, researcher, and educator who is at the forefront of innovative digital documentation and urban design. She leads the DVARCA lab, focusing on resilient city planning and climate change mitigation. We also have with us today project specialist and municipal councillor, Ms. Harshita Narwekar. She is a dedicated corporator representing ward number 226 in Mumbai Municipal Corporation. With a strong background in healthcare finance management, she holds an MBA in Management Information Systems and an MS in Healthcare Management from Temple University, USA. Our next speaker is Director for Initiatives in India, University of Notre Dame, Mr. Dhiraj Mehra. He is a dynamic leader driving the University of Notre Dame's initiatives in India. As the Director for Initiatives in India at Notre Dame's Mumbai Global Center, he spearheads research projects and fosters partnerships with leading institutions. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, who's joining us virtually again, is Ms. Hazel Khoo. She is the Director for Coastal Protection Department, Public Utilities Board, Singapore. Leading the charge and protecting Singapore from rising sea levels and flood risks, Ms. Khoo, Director of the Coastal Protection Department at PUB. She has a focus on holistic coastal adaptation. She oversees site-specific studies and integrates climate uncertainties into adaptation pathways. A very warm welcome to all the speakers of our panel discussion. Requesting the speakers of this panel discussion who are already present here to please join us on stage. I once again request the delegates to kindly settle down, and I also request speakers of the current panel discussion to please make their way to the stage. We will be starting very shortly. At this point, I would also like to reiterate a little bit about the beautiful mementos that we're going to be I would like to inform you all the ELG roundtable will be beginning at 12. A reminder to all those of you who are participating in the ELG roundtable, the roundtable will be starting at 12 p.m. So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start with the current panel discussion. I request our moderator for the session, Dr. Ronita Bardhan, to kindly take over.
Stand there because of very obvious reasons. You won't be able to see me. No, that's fine. Can I have the presentation up here? So first of all, thank you so much to Mumbai First for inviting me to share my thoughts and also moderate this wonderful session that we are going to talk about rising cities. And yes, Asia and all over Asian cities are rising. Just help me. Excuse me. The green one is... All right, thank you. And so in this session, we're going to specially talk about the rising tide. Almost all cities in Asia are rising in many senses, not just in terms of climate effect, not just in terms of facing the challenges, but also probably we all know the future of urbanization lies in most of these cities. So in order to set the agenda for today's talk, I'm going to present few of the work which I have been doing and trying to embed and into this session and trying to find out what are the major challenges and probably some solutions that we might be able to respond to. So a very brief introduction, which you have already, thank you so much. A very brief introduction about my work. I work in data-driven design. I lead the sustainable design group at University of Cambridge. And I work on primarily these 4 sustainable development goals, which the colors pretty much give away. One of my major vertical, which I have not heard in the inaugural session, is about gender mainstreaming and gender equality. And why that is also important, especially in the Asian cities, is something that I will talk a little bit more. So what I do, I basically do data-driven design, convert the data-driven evidences into policy, working with a large number of data sets, and each of these data sets can be both quantitative in terms of measuring, monitoring, and simulations, quite a technical stuff, but also data from people. So today we saw a film where we saw it from the perspective of a person who works in the water sector, who works in the his daily wage in providing water to whole of Mumbai. But it's from a very personal perspective, and these personal perspectives sets up the contextual setting of what sort of solutions it might give us. And so we often miss this personal touch, and that's where a large amount of data from the personal setting is very, very important. I combine all of them in order to generate solutions for few of the major challenges that our world is currently facing, both in terms of space and energy and carbon efficiency, obviously responding to the global agenda. Finally, what we are currently seeing, what this session will talk about, is primarily 2 major challenges. Our Earth is warming up, and that means we are going to face quite a bit amount of challenge in terms of heat, as well as water level rise, which has its consequences we just saw in the inaugural session about flooding. Secondly, we are going to see major of these changes in the global south, where our future urbanization lies. And that primarily means most of these cities which we see currently are global Asian cities, also global coastal cities. What does it say? It says majority of the population actually lives there. We have recently seen an image on migration and how people actually move and migrate to these global coastal cities. And recently we did work with one of my esteemed colleagues, where we predicted that why climate vulnerability should include major extreme events in a way such that it kind of responds to the extreme challenges of extreme days, like extreme heat days. So we said that, however, if you look at climate vulnerability indexes of major coastal cities, we often find out they do not point out to where the actual extremity of the dangers lies. Wherever, if you compare with what people actually feel in terms of weather extreme events. So when we look at the image on your right-hand side, it kind of tells us what sort of danger zone people will be when India faces the extreme heat events. So it's all about how actually people feel, and it's not just a temperature threshold that most of us, or when governments declare extreme heat events, they kind of declare it based on certain temperature thresholds. So coming to Mumbai and trying to understand, does Mumbai has the capacity to cool down? Does Mumbai has the capacity to enhance the resilience from extreme heat waves? So this is a chart in front of you of different types of built environment that you will encounter in Mumbai, and there are primarily 5 categories, and you can see they are a mix of distance between the buildings, height. So it's not about very high FSI. There is no doubt high FSI will give us the developmental opportunity that the city provides, but it also opens up into a more narrative about how we can make the city more climate resilient. And when we started looking at the heat dimension of these cities, we did find that while the cities or the urban forms, which are extremely high rise, where the high FSI is being consumed, they do heat up to a very high level. However, they also cool down very fast. So the more amount of area that you have below the red line, you would want that. So majority of the time, from say 6 o'clock in the evening to 10 o'clock in the morning, if that area is more cooler, you would need lesser energy to cool down the space. I mean artificial cooling. Whereas where I show it in the slums, but most of the low income population areas, which was also highlighted in the previous session, where majority of the population of Mumbai lives, that is the area which doesn't heat up to a major level, but it traps the heat for a much longer time. And that's where solution requires. There's a lot of adaptive solutions that are localized into these spaces, which often miss the opportunity to be harnessed. So when we started looking at the actual heat stress, which area, which type of built environment Mumbai actually faces the maximum heat stress, we did find out one area which doesn't cool down faster, doesn't have a very high cooling potential, also has a very high heat index. And that's the area where we are currently looking to house majority of our population, which is the affordable housing. It is the housing that you see where most of the low-income population are being transferred to. And that sets the agenda that most of the coastal cities are actually facing this sort of a challenge where these low-rise buildings are transformed to high-rise. That's not a problem, that's actually an opportunity, but how we do it is about how we build up these relationship between the height of the buildings to distance between the buildings. And when we look at it, it's a shame we cannot see what's written at the bottom. When we do the high-rise stuff, when we do the high-rise buildings, we do see we tend to reduce the distance between the buildings in order to accommodate the large volume of population. What it does is it traps the heat, it misses the opportunity to provide cool green spaces, accessible green spaces, which has a huge release or burden of non-communicable disease. Finally, we need to understand the heat pattern. We need to understand the heat solutions that are embedded into these places. I'll just finish with one and invite my speakers of this session to speak about and elaborate on these areas, which is when we look at the climate change scenarios of heat that Mumbai is going to face, there is definitely a rise up to 38 degrees. This is annual average, so don't think 38 degrees, we do face it, so it's not much. It's actually much more than that by 2080. However, there's a difference when you ask a male person about their temperature neutrality when they feel comfortable or when they start feeling discomfort or when they will start to operate an air conditioning unit, that is around 28.8 degrees. And there is no points for guessing that the women, when we interviewed them, especially in low-income communities, their temperature neutrality was 30 to 32.5 degrees. What does it mean? It means there will be a large range of population, which is particularly the vulnerable population, who will not do any kind of intervention when average temperature rises. And those will be the female population who do not have a lot of agency and access to operating cooling devices. And that's a major issue. When we look at these global climate events, we often do not look at these diversities, the inclusiveness about how to include all the population. We often see it from one point perspective. And that's where I think this session would help us understand the equality, diversity, and inclusiveness into these climate change agendas. And finally, ending up today, we have seen this slide about how Mumbai would be in a major risk zone. And today we're going to see case studies from Mumbai, Singapore, and even from Indonesia, and I think major other cities, other coastal cities. So I invite my speakers for this session to speak about their work, and also invite you all audience to be involved in it, and we would encourage a lot of more interactive session. Thank you so much. So our first speaker is joining through virtual communication and is Dr. Krupali Uplekar, Krusche, who is the Director and Development Advancement of Resilient Cities Alliance, which is DVARCA from University of Notre, US.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank Mr. Velrasu and Dr. Bardhan for the introductions. Also, I would like to thank the organizers, Mumbai First, for setting this event in place. My name is Professor Krupali Krusche. I am a faculty member at the University of Notre Dame, and I am today also representing as the director of DVARCA, which is Development and Advancement of Resilient Cities Alliance that we have created for protecting against climate change across the globe. The team members for this work is, I'm a principal investigator for the work that we are doing in this research, but it involves faculty members from all of the university itself. We have faculty from College of Engineering, School of Architecture, College of Science, ND Energy, and the Lucy Data Science Center. We also have external partners like the NASA Sea Level Rise team, Esri, which is known for data gathering and data management, Xylem Water Solutions team, Urban Design Associates located in Pittsburgh who are working on design solutions, Jacobs Engineering also involved in India and abroad in United States and working on engineering and infrastructure solutions, along with University of Colorado's Cirrus team, which are researching vertical land motion studies on various parts of India, including Mumbai. This team is collaborating also with our international wing of Notre Dame through the head of the Mumbai Global Center from Mr. Dhiraj Mehra, and with the project specialist Harshita Narwekar, who both are working with Indian national, state, and local governments to create the best collaboration advancements we can in the field in India for us to be able to bring this expertise from a global perspective to engagement in for the needs of Indian teams. And that's how we want to say, and also as a Mumbaikar myself, it would be very interesting for us to understand and explore ways in which the city of Mumbai is moving forward with its own climate policy. So to begin with this presentation, I would like to pose in front of you two questions. The first one is, how is climate change impacting the city of Mumbai? And how accurate is the data that we know that different people are projecting? There are different types of news information that's out there about what will happen to the city of Mumbai and what are the things that are impacting it. The other thing that is important is, how can new infrastructure and development of the city of Mumbai be built in a manner that's resilient to its future and its future needs? Towards this, we need to understand the city of Mumbai is facing many kinds of concerns, including sea level rise, tropical storms, heat island effect, flooding, water scarcity, air pollution, and carbon emission. So if you look at the global perspective of things, these factors are affecting many different cities on different scales globally, and including the fact that there are many countries, including United States, being one of the highest carbon emitters across the globe. China contributes also highly next, and then there is the contribution of a country like India. And so it is important for us to understand how this carbon emissions could be reduced, along with the understanding of how energy consumption and energy utilization is met in a green way, along with other aspects of how cities and urban environments are grown and developed. India is taking a great way forward. It has already created its own agreement and understanding of how this is from the central government, an outline of how this India is going to look at its long-term low carbon development strategy. And you can see in there that they are concentrating on 5 different aspects that are critical. The first one is waste management. Second is water management, which is very critical in India. Third is urban planning, green cover, and biodiversity. Fourth is energy and green building. And finally, mobility and air quality. Each of these affect The environment in Mumbai also very clearly and specifically, especially because of the kind of large amount of population that the city carries. To that fact, though India, in comparison to United States and China, has much smaller amount of land available for the same amount of people, population, or even more population as it grows in the future, India has been able to manage to protect its forest cover for a long time. But with the increasing population, there is a certain burden or pressure that is on the cities of India that are going to cause certain amounts of impact in our forest range and the need to protect it as we go forward. As you can see, in case of Mumbai over time developed since 1600s till today, and went from a small hamlet to a megapolis city of population of around 21 million people. Now, depending on what part of the city you're looking at, you are calculating different populations and different population densities. But one thing that has become very apparent for us is the loss of green space within the city itself. From a city that was lush green and full of mangroves and natural habitat, it has now become an absolutely infrastructure-based, highly burdened city with a lot of people and population needs. And this causes the problems that we are going to see further related to air pollution, and also the relation of the amount of economic loss that happens when floods take place in areas that are quickly getting to a place of concern. As Mr. Velrasu definitely has talked about in his introduction, the city faces, in monsoon especially, big challenges. And that is because we are having two concerns. One, that rainwater is coming at very high speeds within the city, and this water cannot leave the city as quickly as it needs to. The engineering system designed and updated now in recent years has a good capacity, but at the same time, the water that is coming and is accumulating in the city is faster. Combine this math with high tide and you are getting more problematic situations because the drainage of water becomes complicated. You can imagine that this is just going to get more and more worse with sea level rise. As the sea level projects further and further, we are going to combat what we see is the situation in Jakarta, where the water from the city needs to drain out and the water from the sea wants to drain in. The math of these two creates highly susceptible conditions on the edges of the city already, and it's going to just get worse as the city moves further. Presently, as you can imagine, the city's land has the island part of the city, which is more rocky structure, and then there's the landfill part. The landfill part, of course, is made up of landfill material, and that's exactly the location where you're starting to see present flood zones or flood-prone zones, because that's a shallower land than the rest of the terrain that's existing. So one problem is the fact that this becomes like a water bowl in between the city's fabric, where there is a tendency for water to collect at very high speeds. But as projected in the future, this is, for example, the scenario that happened in 2005 floods in the city of Mumbai, where most of the main city of Mumbai got flooded very quickly because of that water bowl effect. But also beyond that, what you see in here is the blue water filled area, and that's from the sea level rise indentation. So these two conditions, flooding and sea level rise, together are causing immense pressure on the infrastructure of the city of Mumbai. Now, I'm going to add to it what is happening in the city of Jakarta, which is, it is a sinking city scenario. which is where you start bringing in the idea that the land can possibly sink because of various scenarios. The dilapidation of drinking water, or the fact that drinking water is taken from underneath the ground and does not get quickly refilled. So salt water starts coming in, or the land actually starts settling down. And the other part that is a concern, which is, for example, visible in New York now, a recent article that talks about how vertical land motion can be created because of the pressure of skyscrapers that are getting built on the Manhattan area, and how these skyscrapers create immense pressure on the land underneath and thus is causing subsidence of the land. Now, combine sea level rise with flooding, with the intent of the buildings pressure or the water depletion pressure, all these causing the built land to sink, multiplying or compounding the effect of sea level rise and flooding on the city of Mumbai. So with these three combined, if you look at this kind of a general, again, this is a satellite-based scenario of 2050 for the city of Mumbai. In case of annual floods levels, this is where we are going to reach. And the impact on the city of Mumbai is already pretty dramatic. This is a level of concern that cannot be ignored. And this is where the city of Mumbai needs to look into what can happen and how we can protect the lands from future situations of major economic losses, and also loss of life, loss of household, and loss of incomes for people that live within the city and are benefiting from the life there. So how do we deal with this problem? You know, it seems like it's an impossible problem to solve. And many people have recommended the scenario of creation of a seawall. Jakarta has a seawall. Manhattan is proposing a seawall. Charleston is coming up with a seawall. Is seawall the solution? You know, basically, seawall is just going to help you for a short time with the concern. Seawalls do not always solve all the problems that concern the site. A holistic approach is very important. And to be able to do that holistic approach, the first thing that needs to be done is the design solutions need to be worked out with two specific phases. Phase one needs to actually examine, assess, and understand the modeling of the site and what exactly is happening there. And phase two is actual planning that needs to come into consideration as to what and how the viability of the site can be produced. I would like to conclude my talk by saying any of the solutions created cannot be comprehensive until we talk about the natural environment in engagement with the built environment. I want to remind all Mumbaikars about how beautiful this city has been for over the last few decades, and we do not want to lose its beauty while we think about new ways in which its growth can take place. So how does energy efficiency, infrastructure, affordability, and embodied energy work along with freshwater resources, good air quality, good food, and good ways in which you're protecting the environment? This can only be done if there is a comprehensive solution that comes into place, which engages experts in climate studies, the political decision makers, policymakers, hazard management team members, and environmentalists to work together with urban planning teams to finally create the design solutions that we need. We are looking forward to working on this with everybody present today, and I thank you all for taking the time to listen to this presentation, and let's go. Namaskar. Have a great day today in Mumbai. Thank you.
Thank you, Krupali, for this quite a resonating presentation, and also emphasizing that there is a need for integrated planning. And you did show us about, talk about involving all major stakeholders, including the people, and that's very, very important. I think that kind of leads us to our second presenter. who is also joining us through BC, and that is from Miss Hazel Khoo, who is the Director of Central Protection Department Public Utilities Board in Singapore, and she's going to talk about Singapore's approach towards coastal protection. Can we have her presentation online, please?
A very good afternoon to distinguished leaders, delegates, and guests from around the world. I'm Hazel, and it is my privilege to share with you our approaches for coastal protection in Singapore. Sea level rise is indeed the challenge of our times, one of which Singapore, Mumbai, and many other coastal cities face. Over the decades, Singapore has actually made great strides to reduce our flood-prone areas from 3,000 hectares to 30 hectares. However, with climate change, Singapore will remain vulnerable to flooding. This is because we are a low-lying island state, and seawater may enter through canals that lead to the sea and flood the surrounding areas during exceptionally high tides. The impact is exacerbated when high tides coincide with rainfall. And we experienced such flooding just earlier this year, as shown in the picture on the right. With climate change bringing more intense rainfall and sea level rise, this will be a new challenge for us. Sea level rise poses an existential threat to Singapore. We are home to over 5 million people, and out of our land area of 730 square kilometers, 30% is less than 5 meters above the mean sea level. Our projections today indicate that sea level could rise by up to 1 meter by the end of this century. And after factoring high tides and storm surges, we could end up with sea levels as high as 4 to 5 meters. And that's not all. Climate change will also bring about more intense rainfall at higher frequencies. Singapore is treating climate change defenses with utmost seriousness, as underscored by our Prime Minister in his 2019 National Day rally speech. PUB was then appointed in 2020 as the National Coastal Protection Agency to lead and coordinate whole-of-nation efforts to protect Singapore from rising sea levels. Today, coastal protection is one of our key strategies to build a resilient future under the Singapore Green Plan 2030. While coastal protection is a challenge, it also presents new opportunities. And let me share with you briefly our key approaches. Firstly, we will adopt a holistic risk assessment approach. We are currently developing a national coastal inland flood model that will simulate the twin effects of projected sea level rise and more intense rainfall. The model will allow us to continually monitor our flood risks based on the changing environment as well as latest climate change projections. At the same time, we are also building up predictive capability to provide advanced warning of extreme coastal events to enhance our operational and emergency responses. Second, we will adopt a flexible and adaptive approach to deal with the uncertainties of climate change. So instead of determining an ultimate level of protection for coastal protection measures, we will instead develop adaptation pathways that will chart out possible near-term measures, which may either restrict or offer future options for adaptation. This will support near-term decision-making for no-regret interventions, but allow us to have room for future adjustments. We will then monitor actual sea level rise and decide on the next course of action when we are better informed by the latest climate science. This is important since climate adaptation is a long-term rather than a one-off undertaking. Now, while Singapore is small, our coastal areas are highly varied in terms of land use. This means that we cannot apply a one-size-fits-all solution for coastal protection. Our solutions will therefore need to be customized based on the unique characteristics and constraints of each site. Our coastal areas are also highly developed, and it is not easy to find a space to build coastal protection measures. Hence, our third approach is to adopt integrated planning to achieve functional solutions that can deliver benefits beyond coastal protection. For example, this could be an opportunity for us to create new recreational spaces and to combine with nature to enhance the biodiversity of the environment. As coastal protection is also a significant endeavor, we will need site-specific interventions, and hence our fourth approach is to phase out our studies so that implementation works can be done progressively. This is critical to avoid bunching up of our resources so that we can continue with our coastal protection efforts sustainably in the decades ahead. To do so, we have actually divided mainland Singapore into 8 segments. And the area within each segment is hydraulically connected up to a certain level. And so coastal protection measures forming a continuous line of defense for that segment of coastline would be required to protect the entire region from coastal flood risk. In terms of phasing, we have prioritized segments that are more vulnerable to flood risk and where more critical infrastructure are located. Coastal protection is also considered a nascent area for Singapore. And since we are embarking on this long-term vision, we are cognizant of the importance of building long-term capability. New challenges like this will require new knowledge, new technology, and new solutions. And earlier this year, we have launched a 125 million research program for coastal protection and flood management. The aim of this program is to collaborate with research institutes and the industry, both locally and globally, to drive the development and application of effective and smart solutions, to catalyze the growth of the local R&D ecosystem, and to facilitate the translation and commercialization of solutions. And last but not least, fighting against climate change is a shared responsibility, and we must bring everyone on board to contribute to this national agenda. To help people understand the impacts of sea level rise and the need for urgent action, we have carried out educational campaigns to raise awareness. And some of these light-hearted and edutainment videos have made waves in the media. We have also conducted community dialogue sessions with stakeholders so that Singaporeans can actively participate in the solutioning process and better appreciate the challenges, trade-offs, as well as opportunities that can come with different solution options. Building community resilience is the key, as there is also no way that we can remove flood risk completely with climate change. Hence, we will need people to know what they can do and what they will need to do so that they can get out of harm's way. So this is a very quick overview of Singapore's approach for coastal protection, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ms. Khoo, for actually showing us some of the major keywords of pathways, where I do see things like flexibility, multiple dimensionality, and also shared stewardship, which has been like co-creation of solutions, is very, very important. And I think what other place in the world than Singapore to learn about how to protect the coastal line and how to protect the inland flooding. Thank you for sharing your views on it. I think we will take the questions in the end. However, I would like to call, there is a lineup, but if you wouldn't mind, I would actually like to call on stage Mr. Bart de Jong for sharing how Netherlands kind of resonates with what Singapore has shown us.
Yeah, we're not an Asian city, but nevertheless, I'm pleased to contribute to this session. I don't know whether my presentation is on the screen, not yet. It's actually there to visualize some of the things I said before. Yeah, there we have it. Basically, the story of the Netherlands dealing with climate change, dealing with sea level rise, is a story of fighting floods that we have been doing for centuries, as I just said in the earlier presentation, to living with water. That's a paradigm shift we made. Oh, I have it here. There we go. Okay, to visualize a bit what I said before, this is the Netherlands, and the map of the Netherlands is in the left-hand side of the sheet, and then you see this bird's eye view looking to the northeast of the country. The three cities indicated are Amsterdam in the north, The Hague in the west, and Rotterdam in the southwest. And actually, if we had not invested in flood protection, either from sea or river flooding, the country would look like this. All these three cities would be flooded. And this is not a future scenario with upcoming sea level rise. No, this would be the actual scenario at the moment. But we have invested in a lot of sea defenses and levees along rivers. This is again the map of the Netherlands. The dark blue on the left-hand side is all area lying below sea level. The light blue area is flood prone. That would mean up to 1, 2, 3 meters above sea level. And then the right-hand side, you see the map with all kinds of polders, areas that we have reclaimed from either the sea or lakes that we dried. So a lot of the area that we actually live in now, and also where our GDP is earned, is in these reclaimed areas that are below sea level. And basically, you could say that our problem with sea level rise, floodings, is a self-inflicted injury, because we dried all these lands up first, and then now we have to deal in keeping the water out. We invested a lot in traditional flood defenses. Seawalls like this is not really a seawall, but a storm surge barrier that is in the damming of one of our big estuaries in the southwest of the country. That is what we built. We built a storm surge barrier and open a gate to the port of Rotterdam. This is basically the biggest entrance to the port of Rotterdam, at least the inland port. And what you see in the background is the area that is freely accessible from sea. But this was built in the 1990s to protect a large area, the city of Rotterdam itself, and a large area around it, whenever there was a storm surge. And I think in the 20 years, 25 years, I must say, it has been operational now. It has only been used 4 or 5 times. But we invest a lot in these kinds of infrastructure, just in the event that we have a flood. And of course, what we want to avoid is major floodings. The last major flood we had was in 1953, and then it was decided to fence basically the whole southwestern area of the country off with these kinds of coastal protections that you just showed. So, as I just said, these are hard seawalls that Mrs. Khoo talked about. This is also what we have been doing for quite some time, and actually our thinking developed. And what we're doing now is trying to build with nature. And this is a topic that we are also going to discuss in the panel. This is the coastline of the Netherlands that used to be actually a straight line, but what we did over here is we created a so-called sand motor. A lot of sand was deposited in this area, and then the national current going from southwest to the northeast along the coast transports all this water along the coast, and it deposits it on beaches. So where you would normally have a lot of let's say, encroachment of the sea on these beaches, this sand motor makes sure that there is a constant deposit of sand on the beaches more to the north of the sand motor. So this is basically where we really have nature with us working on coastal protection. Yeah, that's as far as sea level rise is concerned, and that of course is one of our biggest problems, but we've also facing other problems. It has been mentioned before a few times already. Climate change is also making that we have more intense and concentrated periods of rainfall. So they are clogging our cities as well. We've had these examples already of the big Asian cities, but this is an example of Amsterdam. Also, we are facing waterlogging over there. And not only in the cities. This is a highway somewhere in 1997, I think this picture was taken, which makes for a nice lake that you can surf on. But of course, that's not what it was intended for. And this is what we want to avoid. Now, how are we going to do that? I just said that we are We have invested a lot in hard sea defenses, also levees along rivers. But there's an end to that. You cannot just always raise these dikes and levees. And what we're now doing is creating space to accommodate excess water, either from the sea or from rainfall or high river discharges. We have a program. Oh, sorry, that's the other side of the climate change, which is droughts that we're also facing now. The Netherlands is not usually associated with droughts, but this is another area, another issue that we're facing now. And what we are doing actually is creating more room for water, to accommodate water, to retain water in our spatial planning. And one example of that is a program, a nationwide program, which is called Room for the River. What we did over here, this is the city of Nijmegen. You see on the left-hand side, you see the river proper. And on the right-hand side, we dug another extra river, which is there to accommodate extra water in times of high river discharge. So the city doesn't get flooded that much, and the excess water is deviated via this extra channel. Now, the funny thing over here is, this is an example of cross-financing, because what we did over here is create a lot of waterfront property. This new river has a lot of waterfront property, as was already indicated. That is in demand. People like to live along watersides. So here you see that part of the project was financed by creating extra high-value waterfront property. That is one example of creating the room of the river for the river. I must say, is an example of retaining or deviating excess water. And I think that Professor Kool in his presentation mentioned that we should bring back floodplains to river. This is an example of that. Further down the river, you see that the floodplains that were being built up. Also, actually, this area that was dug there was completely built up. We are giving that space back to rivers. But we're also doing that in urban areas. This is an urban floodplain in Rotterdam. Normally, the canal over there will be as wide as the bridge is. In times of high rainfall, the river cannot discharge it to the sea, and we retain the water there in this urban floodplain, so to say. Another example is a retention basin that we constructed. This is an artist impression, but it exists already. It's a retention basin to accommodate extra rainfall, stormwater, in times of heavy rain, of course, but it's beneath a parking garage. So here we have a dual functionality, a parking garage, but once you construct it on the ground, make sure that, what we did here is we made sure that we have an enormous water basin capable of accommodating a lot of excess water at a certain time. And then another solution is of living with water is don't try to fight it, but go with the flow, so to say, ebb and tide. This is a floating residence in Amsterdam. These houses basically go up and down with the water level, so no problem of flooding over there. And then last but not least, what we also do in our cities is create water scarce, as we call that. This is retention bases in the city center of Rotterdam. It's multifunctional also. This is a sports area. The Zapkin, yeah, it says on top there, is a university for vocational training, so to say. So they needed space. They had space. It was a sporting ground. But the urban developers there decided, hey, this is also an area that we can use as a water retention basis. So they dug out the basketball court, and there is a skating area around that. And whenever it rains very prolonged and very extreme, then this whole retention basin fills up. So these are a number of examples that we are actually bringing in practice already in the Netherlands, and we're very happy to share that with Mumbai first, and other Asian cities as well. I'd leave it at that. I could talk about this for a few hours more, but I'll leave you at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bart, for showing us those wonderful eye-opening images, because these images are not just speaking of more than the words. but also they are giving us a lot of hope that we can have nature-based solutions while combining with cities that float. So the floods can probably never get to us, but that is very hopeful. On a very hopeful note, I would now call upon Mr. Jai Asundi, who is Executive Director at the Center for Study of Science, Technology and Policy. Jai, if you could come up and also give a brief introduction of yourself. All right. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me today. I will, of course, be doing two things. One is putting out a little bit of information. Dr. Roxy has actually put it out already. I'll just try to reiterate some points. But what I thought after listening to the morning speeches is also raise some of the questions that Mr. Pardeshi brought about. Can we think about it a little differently from what we have, and maybe challenge ourselves as a think tank? That's one of the things that we like to do, is challenge the norms that we have. So let me just go ahead with the first tenet of what we are trying to say, is that when we think of most policy problems, we think about it from three particular perspectives. One is, do we have the information needed, and whether we all agree about the information. I think for a long time, there was skepticism about climate change in itself, and everyone said, no, it's not going to happen. But now I think we've gotten past that. The second part is that about implementation, that do we have the technologies, or do we have the wherewithal to do what we need to do? And to that effect, I think we do have a lot of technologies, we do have the understanding. And that brings us to the most important part of the third I, which is intention. Do we really have the intention to do what we need to do in order to achieve what we have? So if you can just go to the next slide, please. So I think I will just run through the slides, because this contains information that you have heard, seen many times before. We do see that the global sea level rise scenario is increasing. They're exceeding almost 3 to 4 mm per year. And the Indian scenario is even worse, simply because the average temperature rise in the Indian Ocean is greater than the average temperature rise. And I think Dr. Roxy also put this slide out. This is now blown up a little more, and we see that the last few years, the rise is actually quite significant. It's more than what we have been seeing over the last century. And so this brings us to the four models that we look at. And what do we see? We have possible increases of almost 9 to 10 centimeters by 2030, 17 to 25 centimeters by 2050, and then 23 to 42 centimeters by 2070. And this could increase even further depending on the situations that we're looking at. And of course, we've seen many of these maps of Mumbai. We are seeing the proposed land use plan. And what does it really mean? That from a 10 to 50 centimeter sea level rise, anywhere from 3.9 to 7.7 square kilometers could be inundated. So this brings me to the most important part. Where do we go from here? Let's start with the first part of mega trends. What do we see in mega trends? Is that there is population growth in India. I think if any of you look at population trends for cities in India compared to other cities in the world, the population growth rates are northwards of 1 to 2% every year. So from a planning perspective, you can think about the challenges you have when you have to build infrastructure, because you're thinking decadal timeframes. And when you're looking at 2% per year, we are actually looking at a significant growth over this period of time. How do you plan for something like this? So that brings us to the issue of, if you're going to accommodate people's livelihoods, which means you're going to also need water. You also need to take care of land issues. I mean, we talked about, how do we house these people? And then, of course, air quality concerns. I grew up in Mumbai. We never thought about air quality, and now we're starting to think about it. So that brings us to the real question of values. What are we ascribing to a good life? If a good life for everyone is getting out of your house and jumping into a four-wheeler and getting to your destination within 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I know many of you commute much longer than that, I think we have a problem. I don't think we are going to be able to provide that for all the people, which is where we get to the notion of equity. How do we ensure that the good life is also available to everyone? It is not good life only for 5 people while the 95 people suffer. And I think that's a collective action problem. And this brings us back to the question of intention. I think we will be able to get to the intention if we define a good life for all. And this is what we at C-STEP call the decent quality of life. How do we define that good quality of life? Make sure that we get people into this notion of what is a good life and understanding that it is for the good of all. And this, I will leave with my closing remarks on one of the approaches that we really feel is that we need to have what we call as an ecosystem approach. We need to start bringing together academia to make sure that you have the information and the information is solid. The second is you need to be able to bring in civil society because many of them are the people that will help you address issues of equity. The third one, I think everyone knows, is bringing in the governments. After all, governments are representatives of people. But I think many a time we tend to miss the most important part of all of this is industry. Industry, by and large, gets not included in this simply because we do not think of them, we always think of them as the problem rather than part of the solution. I think industry has to be brought in here because they are the ones that will be able to provide the livelihoods and be also part of the solution rather than being part of the problem. So with that very brief part about trying to challenge our notions, I think we need to think about this ecosystem approach, thinking about how we can solve the problem of intention in order to have the implementation successful for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jai, for actually bringing up the topic of ecosystem services, which also talks about this integrated approach that we need to take in order to start pathways of solution. With this, I would like to bring on stage Dr. Yasukata Fukahori, Consulate General of Japan. Would you like to take it from there?
Yes,
That's fine.
may I speak from here? Thank you for the introduction. I should have brought my PowerPoint presentation, but next time when I come here, I would like to speak more than today. I'm a diplomat, so that I have been involved in diplomatic negotiations for climate change within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Japan. So I know how serious diplomats and the international community are on these issues. And also, I hold a PhD in environmental economics. So personally, I studied a lot about on these issues. So I can talk hours and hours if I am allowed to speak. But today I have only 5 minutes, so I try to be concise today. Before I talk about climate change, I would like to respond about the previous presentator's comment about Tokyo's trees. It's true that Tokyo has only a small number of trees, but that is kind of an intentional policy of our government for the past 3 years. Do you know how much percentage of our land is covered by forests in Japan? If you know, please raise your hand. It's 70% of our land is covered by forests. We bring down people to cities like Tokyo, Osaka, Fukuoka, and to make the city energy efficient. However, we maintain most of our lands intact as a forests. While in India, I understand that the forest rate is less than 20% now, it's 19%. Mumbai may be maintaining a high number of trees compared to Tokyo. That is the policy of Japan, but that's what we have been doing. We needed to concentrate the population in the cities because it makes the city energy efficient, as I said. Because city, we can develop a network of public transportation. In Tokyo, if you have come to Tokyo, you might have noticed that we have a network of public transportations, trains and metros and others. All those trains and metros run on electricity. So if the energy can come from the clean power plants, the discharge of emission of CO2 is actually zero by those public transportation, mass transportations. That's why that we consider that Mumbai also needs the introduction of mass transportation. If Mumbai is going to install a mass transportation system like Tokyo or New York, Mumbai, environment in Mumbai will be much better. Even though that the 10 million people move around in Tokyo on mass transportation, air in Tokyo is very clean. I'm sure that Harshita-san, you've been to Tokyo recently, so you might have noticed that we have been maintaining clean air because of mass transportation, which Mumbai needs to acquire. That's why the Japanese government is cooperating with the Maharashtra government to install Metro number 3, high-speed railway from Mumbai to Ahmedabad, and Trans-Harbour Link bridge from Mumbai to Navi Mumbai. Those are really important to make the business of Mumbai better. But also all those infrastructure projects are environmental friendly. That's what I want to mention first. Now I'd like to talk about climate change issues. As a diplomat, I've been talking on those matters with the government of Maharashtra, scholars, and industry people, many people in Mumbai and India. I have come to notice that there are a few points which are not fairly shared by the Indian general public. Because the climate change issues is the, in a way, scientific matter, scientific phenomenon. It's very important for us to have a scientific common understanding. And there are a few points which we don't share such scientific figures and understanding between Indian people and the international community probably. The first fact is that OECD member states called rich men's club in the world, industrialized nations in the world, USA, European nations, and Japan. All those countries have not increased the emission of CO2s during the past 25 years. We held a very important meeting in Japan called Kyoto meeting, and then we created the Kyoto Protocol in 1997. Ever since we, OECD member nations, most of the OECD member nations agreed on Kyoto Protocol, we've been working very hard to reduce the amount of CO2 emissions. So fortunately, we succeeded to at least stabilize the emission of CO2. So that, once again, USA, Japan, European nations have not increased the amount of CO2s. We have not succeeded in reducing much, but thanks to the EU nations' efforts, we have started reducing the total amount of emissions nowadays. However, in this century, after Kyoto Protocol, the amount of total CO2, greenhouse gases, increased a lot, as we observed. It's the increase about 60% within the relatively short period of time. It's a huge increase within a short period of time. So that increase actually happened outside OECD member nations. Many people have an impression that OECD member nations, industrialized nations, has responsible for the climate change in this century as well. But that's not the fact. Actually, the increase of emissions happened at other parts. And particularly, I can say that almost China single-handedly increased the amount of CO2 within this century. China used to be minor producers of CO2 in last century, But now China, as you know, the largest emitter in the world. According to the statistics figures of United Nations, IPCC and the UNEP and others, China now emits over 30% of total emissions globally, which is actually larger than USA, Japan, European countries all combined together. So China alone produces much more CO2s for those OECD nations. If we need to be serious about scientifically stop climate change, we have to stop China. But I don't think it's not an easy job. And then China doesn't stop. China has intention to increase the total amount of CO2s until at least 2030. So that the amount of CO2 will continue to increase. However, I'm not criticizing China. China still holds a vast population of poverty in China. So China needs a development. So alleviation of poverty is equally important international agenda. So we support China's the economic development, not only China, but other countries as well. But at least we have to have scientific figures in our mind as a basis of discussions. And also, many people comment that China needs to develop further because per capita emission of China is small compared to other countries. It was true until about 15 years ago. Now the international average of CO2 emissions is about 4.9 tons per person. So each international community per person emit 4.9 tons of CO2s. That's international average. China emits now 8.2 tons. So it's China's per person, per capita, it's not the total amount, but per capita emissions already much higher than international average. And also, for some of the EU member states like France, Italy, and the UK, their per capita emissions about 6 tons, or 7 tons, or 5 tons. So it's much smaller than Chinese per capita emission. So China now emits higher than some of the G7 member countries as a per capita level. So that is the also figures which not known to the many Indian general public. But still, once again, I'm not criticizing China. China needs development. Alleviating poverty population is very, very important subject for all of us. So, but anyway, based on those figures and the fact, we must continue our efforts to contain climate change. Since my time is only 2 seconds left, I need to finish here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for highlighting about Japan. Japan is very close to me. I did my PhD in University of Tokyo. So I think the reliability of mass transit also comes in when we actually want to transform Mumbai's mass transit into a much more integrated, much more larger network. And that's where lessons from Tokyo is very, very important to bring in, and how reliable and how accurate the predictions are. And I think today morning we did see that that system is already, you showed us, that system is already in place and probably will be increasing in efficiency. That does help us in reduction of emissions in a larger extent. Thank you so much for the insight. And moving ahead, I would like to probably now will call Harshita Narwekar. You are a project specialist, and probably if you could, from DVARCA, and I think that's fantastic. Let's hear more about DVARCA, and I think Krupali touched upon the larger issues.
So I am the local, I'm part of the local government here. I was representing Colaba Cuff Parade. We started DVARCA probably in 2020, but because of COVID, we were delayed. Just recently, Mr. Velrasu and University of Notre Dame, BMC and University of Notre Dame have signed an MOU for that. So I was instrumental in making sure that was done. We are doing what Krupali has actually covered all the technical aspects. What we need to do here now, I think, just to give it a little bit of a push, because I think there is enough understanding of the risk and the emergency or urgency of the problem. But we need to start looking at doing this location specific studies, which is why we are we've done the MOU so that there is more access to data and the accuracy of the data as well, because as she mentioned, the team is of global experts. It's a consortium of global experts having from NASA as well as ESRI, and water management and coastal engineering as well. So what that does is we can get access to a lot of technical expertise, and what we can do here is local capacity building, and then go on forward with their recommendations, use best practices from global best practices, and implement them at a local level in Mumbai here. And what I probably in part of this group do is kind of push it with our local governing bodies. What I suggest the way forward for our conversation that we are having here, which is very, very informational, is I think we should push for a core committee to be formed at a city-based committee, which has stakeholders, like the integrated approach that you're talking about. And as Mr. Nair mentioned earlier, that a COO kind of a person heading that committee. Could be our DCM, it could be our CM or whatever, but have engagement from the government, from the political stakeholder, as well as the agencies, because we have in Mumbai, we have a lot of government agencies like the BMC, BPT, MMRDA, all of them on one platform, along with the global and local experts, as part of that panel, wherein you have urban planners, you have coastal engineers, you have oceanographic experts. And once you do that, we form that committee, we'll be able to come up with, the data sets are all disparate. They can all come on one platform, and then we can have a comprehensive study, which then comes into the solution-based, strategies, like the mitigation strategies that are really required. This whole process is going to take, the study itself, the location-specific studies, which are the flooding spots, what are the actual interventions required, what is the best nature-based interventions, or infrastructure-based intervention required. And I would also suggest a lot of community engagement. I think that is something which is missing in our whole effort. I think we need to probably engage communities, as you mentioned, because I think that is a very big element, and we are affecting their lives. This is going to affect their lives and livelihood. So we should make sure there's a lot of community engagement. And as he mentioned as well, that there needs to be industry, like the private sector engagement is also that needs to, come in, because ultimately all of this will happen with climate financing, because funding is a big part of this whole process. So how that is going to happen is a bigger challenge, because for the government, I think if we do a public-private partnership, it's just a suggestion. I think having private sector engagement with the government stakeholders, I think we can move forward for the financing and funding. So this is what I think in our effort to make the city resilient. But the only essence in this, the only thing that I would like to say as a parting thing is that this urgency of this situation is such that we need to take this forward at a rapid pace, rather than just kind of take it slowly. And I'm seeing that with these kind of efforts with Mumbai First, doing having these conversations at this platform, it's bringing the attention it deserves. Also, when we do community engagement, there'll be awareness, stakeholder engagements. I think we should just move at a faster pace than we are currently. That is, I think, because it's an urgency. I'll say that, and I'll end my two. Thank you.
Thank you, Harshita. Yes, absolutely. I think you have one of the toughest job. We do science. We try to impact through our science. But what you do is you actually brokerage around the co-creation of solutions, which is so important in today's world. And that's why emphasizing on not the people who are doing the science, not the people who are policy making, but also the people who will be impacted from it. And community engagement, hearing from the people, I think solutions are there. We just need to look there, and that's definitely, you do have a very high risk sort of a job, or I would say quite a challenging task ahead to create these networks of brokerage, which is extremely important in terms of climate talks. And you were very right. It was disappointing to see climate finance being reduced in the COP27 and also COP26, which we saw recently. However, that's because we are facing a health emergency, probably not so much not linked with climate change. So we need to respond to that too. So yeah, thank you so much. And I think I will invite Mr. Dhiraj Verma to speak about the project and also on elaborate on it.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to go too much into the technicals because we've been hearing that quite a bit from people who have much more knowledge than I do. But let me bring you back to a few things that I think are very important for us to think about. I think first and foremost, climate change, I think we all will agree, is real. I think what we don't know is what we need to do to overcome it. I think where we don't know where the data is accurate and where we really need to be going forward and what is going to work and not. That's part of the reason why DVARCA was founded. If you go back, it's a mythical city. That's what many people say. It was built around a low-lying area like Netherlands and ultimately probably gave way to sea level rise. And what do we need to do not to follow in the footsteps of what went wrong globally is something we have to think of. The other thing I would point out is climate change doesn't really have walls and doesn't have boundaries. What we do in one part of the world, not just the city or the country, really affects everyone. And that's something that I think most people don't realize. We touched upon global emissions, which country does more, which country does less, which needs more support for its people and which needs less. But at the end of the day, I think if we don't work as a global group, I think we are never going to succeed in climate change. Funding is one aspect, people is another, but overall, I think that give and take needs to stop happening. I think what we really need to think about more is how do we work together towards solving it. I see a lot of people nodding, but that's the big question that we don't know the answer to. Coming back to the city of Mumbai, if you really think about it, we are a very unique city. Many cities in the world have developed similar to Mumbai, but we've been doing this now for 500 years. We reclaimed a lot of land at points in time where we didn't realize what the long-term impacts of that reclamation is going to be. We are seeing a lot of the effects of age on our city, but unlike many cities, we don't have the privilege to be very resilient in what we do. Most of the city now is privately held in terms of our own residences. Also, we don't have much flexibility in a sense. I've had a lot of conversations with Mr. Velrasu here, and we think about upgradation of infrastructure, but that does mean a lot that we cannot as a city also undertake. If you ask him, he's going to say the best thing to do for flood mitigation is we quadruple our stormwater drains. But is that seriously possible? No, right? So we need to think of unique situations and unique solutions. And Mumbai could be the leader globally for this. On how can we actually use that water, reuse that water, or somehow get that water to a place where it can be stored, rather than find ways in which we can quickly push it out into the sea. There was a proposal earlier by Mumbai to build these large tanks, I believe in Sion area, Sion Matunga area, which I believe is also underway. Similar to what we heard about what happened in Japan and what we heard about these temporary solutions. These are unique solutions that Mumbai also needs to think about. It's not only about blaming the government, saying flooding is increasing, we don't know what you're doing, you're not doing a good job. But when we go back and look at our own contribution towards that flooding, we all turn a blind eye. Every year, the BMC does this massive desilting and cleaning campaign of all our stormwater drains. And what do we as Mumbai citizens really look at when we look at that? And we like, oh, they only completed 60%. But a lot of the creation of that blockage is our own doing. And we're not saying that we are 100% responsible, they've only cleaned up 60% of what we have created. So I think as an overall community and as leaders within what we do, these are also important aspects that go away from, the technical points that we've all spoken about, that yes, we are a city, yes, we are facing sea level rise, yes, we are facing flooding. Another aspect that most people don't realize is, and again, something that was trying to be pretty well managed, and they were trying a lot, is how we use our natural resources. I've been following the new construction of the new airport, and we all talk about how we should not retrain rivers, and that's another major exercise that we are doing, of retraining a river or a tributary of a river that goes literally through the airport. These are again problems that we probably are creating for ourselves 30, 40, 50 years down. And are we really thinking, yes, we are creating a solution, but are we really creating a resilient solution that is not going to trouble us 50 years from now or 75 years from now? These are things we don't really think about. Okay, I'm running out of time as well, and I want to make sure that we get to a good contribution of conversation. So I'm going to stop at this right now and maybe hand over back to you.
Thank you so much, Dhiraj. No, I think Mumbai is unique because of its people, and that has to be taken into account. And what you said is right. Unique solutions for this thriving population is so important. And I think we have to ask this very critical question to Mr. P. Velrasu, who is the additional Municipal Commissioner of Mumbai, who is actually helping us improve Mumbai and realize the potential of Mumbai. So it's not really a question, but it's a thought that with all these solutions today that we are seeing, with all the number of challenges that we have seen, both in terms of numbers, both in terms of discourses, what is your current priority when you are thinking about resilient Mumbai?
Works? Works? I think most of the technical aspects many panelists have covered. So when I joined civil service almost 20 years back, I saw this movie documentary, An Inevitable Truth by Mr. Al Gore. That time the thought process was, it's a kind of elitist documentary. It's not a truth. But 20 years down the line, if you see, most of the things, what was discussed, it is seen everywhere. In fact, some time back, I was very happy to see the New York City subways flooded. Not in a bad way. We thought whether it's a developed country or a developing country, whether it is north or south, the global climate change is real. It's happening. Some are historically at advantage, like Netherlands. They have this handling floods history, they have this history because of the need, because most of the countries below the sea level, so they have become experts in that. Maybe they are helping other countries to equip themselves, like they helped Jakarta to develop a plan for the city, right? Say cities like London, even though they are not under a degree of severity of threat is not like Netherlands, but still they have the historical advantage. So they have constructed this Thames barrier, which was almost, I think it's more than 40 years old, right? So that is to prevent the central London flooded from the water from the sea, right? But interestingly, London has planned for a once in a 1,000-year eventuality, right? So that's technical. So they have planned for a once in a 10,000-year eventualities. So that is an extreme probability. They don't want to leave it a chance. But New York, it is a once in a 100-year probability, right? It is not as equipped as London, right? But Shanghai is a once in a 1,000-year probability. They are very well equipped to handle it, even though it is in the Asian country, right? So different countries equip themselves in different ways. So it has different things, like there is a political reason for it. What is a political leadership? How seriously they take it? That's important. Then, of course, the affordability or financial soundness of the cities. For example, Mumbai, we are a very rich city, right? So we can afford to take whatever works we want to in the future. not all cities would be able to do that. So how we are going to address that? That is another issue. Then there are cultural issues. You address only the immediate issues. You really don't think about really that long term. These are the issues. But if you look at Mumbai, I think I represent the municipal corporation. So what I can say is we are pretty serious about it. In fact, we have already published the Mumbai Climate Action Plan reports. One of the main themes is the flooding related to climate change. We are really pretty serious about it. In fact, our teams visited Tokyo several years back to see the sub-tunnel system, right? So we draw a leaf from that, and we have constructed some underground water tanks here, which prevented flooding in at least in 2-3 areas, like the Milan subway. The local people might know, Hind Mada, Milan subway, and Gandhi Market. So we are drawing experiences and lessons from other countries, right? But I think having this conference in Mumbai is very relevant, I would say, because the climate change, the flood issues, the sea level rise, it is going to affect the Asian countries much higher than the other countries. So about 800 million people are going to be affected. So there are more than 38% of that population that is in Asia. And most of the port cities, more than 550 port cities are going to be affected. So we always talk about New York, London, blah, blah. But there are more than 550 cities they are going to be affected. So the measurement is in terms of assets value and the population affected. There are many cities where the asset value is not there. For example, Kolkata. If you get flooded, the major population will be affected, but the asset value is not there. So how do you take out the engineering works? Like Jong shown beautiful photos, which they have done there. Is it really worth undertaking this kind of massive engineering in those places? Because it's a cost-benefit analysis. So it requires highest level of political involvement to decide on that then and there. Otherwise, my fear is most of the things, these kind of things, remain an academic exercise. We discuss, but the people who really matter, they are not in the picture. Okay, either are they joined late, right? Someone pointed about the industries. Someone talked about political leadership, right? So if they join very late, but all these global climate change projects are very long run. You don't construct whatever intervention, you don't do it in 1 or 2 years. They are really long run. For example, the Tokyo tunnel, it took more than 20 years to complete it, right? You plan it today, you will see the results after 20 years. So you have to act now. That is where I think what she suggested, that's an excellent idea. Every city is unique. For example, this Taj Hotel where we are sitting, the water level difference between sea and this place is hardly 2 meters. So it may go down the water in 2050, right? At least the basement. So there you recur really the hard engineering interventions, like what they have done in Netherlands, what they have done this. But if you see the eastern side of Mumbai, where there is a much flooding, they have shown in the maps. We have to see the habitations. What are the kind of habitation? What are the kind of assets? If the habitations are not much, the high value assets are not there, then what you do is the soft scaping, you do the mangroves, you do the bunding, you do the soft scaping, like they put sands there. So that is the thing. Another beautiful concept which Mr. Pardeshi mentioned, they are worth pondering. We don't have to spend lots of money to equip ourselves for this climate change. You have to do the policy tweaking, like our development plan regulations, right? If you do slight policy tweaking, you can achieve the desired results. Like they have shown, the new river is developed, the new real estate is developed, it cross-subsidizes the other interventions. That can be exactly replicated in Mumbai also. It can be done in MITI, it can be done in many places. But then you can't say you have only FSI 4 or FAR, FAR 4, FAR, no. Then you have to go, it has to go as high as 10, 12, maybe 20. So is the political leadership ready to decide on these type of challenges? That is a question. And like the TOD, transit-oriented development, all the metros are coming out. So all this, fortunately in Mumbai, even today, 40% of the population, close to 40%, they live in informal settlements, or locally what we call slums, right? It gives us an opportunity also, because without much cost, without losing much value in terms of assets, existing houses, unlike Miami, you see the Miami, the sea is already into the city, you know. So here, there the situation is reverse, because all the rich stay in low-lying areas. So the real estate value there is evaporating, it is going down. All the poor, they are occupying the elevations. It creates a social problem, because all these fellows, they are trying to move to the higher elevations, and in the process vacating the poor local people, right? It has sociological aspects. But in Mumbai, it is reverse. All the poor people live close to the rivers. So we have the uniqueness. So if we do policy tweaking, I think we can wonderfully handle this climate change. I don't see much of the issue. Even the worst case scenario, it is 1.2 meters, I think we can handle it. But then we have to understand each city is unique, like he said. Mumbai, recently it has become more unique because we are seeing cyclones recently. Every second year we are getting a cyclone, right? So fortunately, every time I pray, the cyclone should cross somewhere south, not on Mumbai. So the issue is because you have a lot of informal settlements. Either like the Takute or heavy cyclone crosses over Mumbai, all of them will be rendered homeless. Who is going to address those issues? So there are unique things, unique problem sets, and I have to reiterate, the research is not exact. Even though science is science, we all use data. It is not the exact science for the simple reason that nobody has predicted the future. All you can do is different simulations. It can be business as usual, or it can be extreme business, or it can be no business. It is all simulations. Nobody has predicted the future. So what science is going to tell today is also some kind of situations. I think if you city-specific committee is formed, then you freeze something. So for Mumbai, for example, the worst case scenario can be, let us assume there is going to be a 1 meter water rise. Finish it. I don't want to do so much research, spending another 30 years. He says 1 feet, 30 or 50, right? Another researcher might say it's 1 meter. Let us go for the worst case scenario, freeze it, then get down to the drawing board, plan what are the immediate solutions, what are the medium-term solutions, what are the long-term solutions. I don't think we'll go wrong if you do that immediately. Thank you.
Thank you so much for showing that there is a lot of momentum in Mumbai itself, and Mumbai is actually a case study for rest of India. So where there is a lot of political will, as you also said. And I agree that we need to go for higher FAR, and although with all the other concerns of environmental concerns, because most of the studies with higher FAR, cities with higher FAR, if you look at Singapore, they have also done a quite a good job in terms of handling the higher FAR. It's about how you manage to do that higher FAR, and that's where the solution lies. It's the devil lies in the details of it. And yeah, so I know I'm standing in between lunch, and it's not very easy to end a session while doing this. I think we can talk for hours and hours on this topic, and obviously lots of lessons to be learned today. So, just to summarize, I think some of the key words that came up so strongly in this session, and I think most important and pertinent for all global coastal cities, including Mumbai, which is probably a world rising leader, is co-production, is nature-based solutions, is about systems-based approach, it's about integrated networks, it's also about people, talking to people, understanding people, it's also about the political will, as you very aptly said, it's about ecosystem services, it's also about understanding not just the infrastructure part and how to adapt that change. So how soon or how rapid we have to do it is a question. But I think what we also probably have emerged from this whole network session is that there is an immediate interest in among people to understand climate science, not from a very scientific perspective, but from a very local knowledge. And I think for India, climate emergency seems like a foreign language, but we have lived with climate change for a very long time. We have lived with extremity. So there is an inherent knowledge in the system which we all should harness. And I think I'll end the session with this, this note, and hopefully we will carry forward these discussions off the stage and have more interactions. Thank you so much. If there's any questions from the audience, I would like to take few of them before we end the session. So we have one there, yes.
Hello, it has been, my name is Prachi Nimkar, and it has been a very fruitful discussion. Just I would like to ask to anyone for the last point, with the higher FAR, when we are talking about that parameter, it is well comprehended the point of including it into the DCR as far as the environmental impact is concerned. But to the developed countries of Japan, Singapore, and Netherlands, I would want to understand that if we go for a higher FAR, would it reverse the existing wind pattern or create more low-lying areas when we have ramps and all with a smaller road width?
Is there any particular person you would like to ask the question
it's actually including a lot of factors which have been.
Yeah. So anybody who would like to take up the question of higher FAR, you can take any one of them.
I think when I said we can go for higher FAR, it has to be highly localized. It is not a general thing. For example, if you see the New York city plan, they have started declaring what are the flood prone zones, what are the flood affected areas. So those areas, the FAR will not be increased. But you have the contour mapping, you have different levels, heights, and then you can couple with the transit routes, like the metro routes. So for example, China has done marvelously well in the TOD. You go to any metro station or railway station, the 1 by 1 square kilometer, the FAR is so high. And all the local commute, there are no cars because they can commute by walk or by cycle. So that type of transit-oriented development, highly localized. It need not be for larger areas. Closer to the metro stations, elevated areas, you give higher FAR, and then there can be a sellable component which can fund the other projects also. So it can be workable only by going into the details. But the product plan is, it is not general, it is highly localized. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes. There's one, and then I'll take yours.
I'd like to say that climate change is inevitable. We are still emitting 39 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year, and it has increased during the decade. That is the root cause of the problem. But the specific question which I have is that because of this, the Arabian Sea temperatures would rise by 1 to 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees, which means that the storm surges would increase. We are only talking of sea level rise. We have not talked of storm surges and how that would impact. Secondly, in 2030s, because of the wobble of the moon, the tidal levels would change and the tidal levels would be much higher. Have we factored that into our planning? Has anybody looked at those aspects?
Is there the question particularly to somebody in the panel? Would you like to direct the question to somebody in the panel?
No, I'm not directing the question to anybody. I would like an answer whether any of us are considering these factors while we are planning.
Yeah, I think Roxy raised his hand, maybe.
So actually, I wanted to make a comment as well on this. So there is a recurring image that has been shown in all these presentations. That's of Mumbai submerging by 2050. That's based on just one single study, based on satellite estimates, which have been calibrated for US, Australia, and some other cities, not calibrated for Mumbai or India. Yeah. And the accuracy because of that, the accuracy for the sea level rise for India is plus or minus 1 meter, which is huge. Yeah. And the reason is because the topography or the local details, local specifics of the altitude measured from the satellite is not calibrated with respect to the local measurements. So we need different departments, scientists, engineers, administration, to share data and work together to do that, to understand how much the sea level will rise, to be exact. And what the gentleman said is true, and that's what we call as compound events. So along with sea level rise, you have storm surges from cyclones, and that can be 5 meters to 10 meters actually. In the Arabian Sea, we have wave rider buoys, which measures the storm surges or the waves due to these cyclones. And that has been up to 5 meters, 6 meters. In the Bay of Bengal, it goes up to 10 meters. And along with that, you have rivers. So if the preceding days, it has been raining, you have the rivers bringing in a lot of water to the coastal drainage area. And along with that, the same cyclones brings a lot of rains. Now that there is more moisture, the same cyclones bring a lot of rains, 100 millimeter, 150 millimeter in one day. So all these can compound together, overlap together. So that is actually the serious threat than just the sea level rise alone. Now, do we have studies? We don't have studies yet to account for these compound events, because these compound events have been, even the term has been coined recently. Research is ongoing. But one thing about India or Mumbai is that we need different departments to work together to address this issue, because the data is with different departments. We need the data from the administration, we need the data from the Met Department, from the the Central Water Commission, we need the data from the oceanographers. Multiple departments have to work together to address this situation.
I can take that a bit further. That's part of what our project is actually collating data that is currently available in Mumbai by several departments. And there's a gentleman here who's our single point of contact, Mr. Ashtankar also, who works under Mr. Velrasu, who explains to us how there is a lot of data available, but there is nobody who's bringing it all together to really understand. Coming back to what was mentioned, this is a sum of all fears. Is it going to rain for a heavy period of time? Is there going to be a storm surge? And is there going to be a cyclonic event all at the same time? Now, that is all predictability. Is it a once in a 1,000-year event? Is it a once in a 10,000-year event? Is it a once in a 100-year event? And how is it moving? Are we moving from once in a 10,000-year to once in a 100, or the other way around? These statistics and probabilities are also as important when you really think about combating these specific, very, very serious events for any city globally. It's not just Mumbai. And if anyone could answer that question accurately and correctly, I don't think we all needed to be in this room today. That is something we really all need to work towards.
Hi. Hi, my question is to...
sorry, she raised her hand, but she couldn't reach the mic.
I'm Professor Pia Mathani. Thank you for a wonderfully constructive discussion. I have a comment and I have a question. My comment is to Ms. Harsha and Mr. Dhiraj. I write a column for Forum Views, which is brought out by Bombay Stock Exchange. And the initiative that you've proposed, if you'd like me to write about it, I would be glad. I think that is something that is long overdue. Now, my question is to the panel, and I want to ask you, the question is actually with reference to the current coastal road that is being built. I know that Mumbai needs connectivity, it's an exigency, but I'm also worried about the kind of trade-offs with the environment that building connectivity in the manner that it's being built, that would have. The insights as expressed from expressed by the Consul Generals of Netherlands, Japan, and Singapore definitely holds promise of solutions for coastal protection in Mumbai. The additional commissioner spoke about political tweaking. Do you think Mumbai is going to see, over the next 3 years, I want to ask the panel, are you hopeful that Mumbai would see aggressive efforts made towards coastal protection? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would you like to take up the question?
Like I mentioned, Mumbai Municipal Corporation, Brigand Mumbai Municipal Corporation, we have been really pretty seriously thinking about all aspects of climate change. One of them, like I said, is the flood management. The flood management, all these points, the coastal protection, then inland protection, when the, like he said, the compounding effect, when the cyclone and heavy rainfall and other events coincide with high tide. So we have to protect the inland also. So all those things are currently under serious discussion. And in fact, the Mitti River, I have to say, we will be going for, the corporation will be going for a major floodgate pump technology. I think Japan has those kind of technology, South Korea also, and Germany also. So to protect the inland, we are going for massive gate pumps located at multiple locations to protect the inlands from the high tide during high rainfall, because these pumps are enabled to pump out the rainfall water, but not to let the sea water inside. So these tenders will also be coming out within another 2 to 3 months. So we have been seriously thinking, even in the coastal road, even though I am not directly dealing with that, but what I understand is they have taken adequate precautions to consider the global climate change also, what are going to be the impacts of the sea, the rise in sea levels, and when there is a rise in the sea level, the impact factor, everything changes. So they have taken adequately all those factors into consideration, and they are creating about 250 acres of green belt also. So there are massive gardens and green areas also they are going to develop. That is also underway. I think those gardens will come up in a matter of another 1 to 1.5 years. So all those factors are already incorporated. Yeah, thank you.
Can I add to that? This MMRDA recently has the climate action body already assigned. They have come up with an expression of interest, and DVARCA was one of the panel when they applied for the expression of interest. And they'll soon be coming up with a request for proposal as well. What this does is it will bring on experts, whoever is probably equipped and they understand the technicalities. Once they make get the project, they can study the problem, come up with solutions, and then the government can take action. So the government is moving in that direction. The reason I think these kind of plenaries and these kind of discussions help is because we bring it back into perspective and put a little bit of pressure and moves more aggressively forward, because that is the need of the hour. Thank you.
I'll take one more question, please. Yes.
I have 2 questions, both for Mr. Velrasu. So at the beginning of your talk, you talked about your admiration for Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth and sort of how the things that it is predicting are now coming true today. But at the end, you make another statement that science is not exact and no one can predict the future. So in your capacity as, as an urban planner, as someone who works with the MCGM, how much do you trust the science? Can you try and reconcile those 2 statements for us? The second is, the MCAP, the Climate Action Plan, is used in many spheres as the emblem of how Mumbai is dealing with climate change. But the climate cell is not yet formed, more than a year, I think, since the plan's release. There's actually no budgetary allocation for MCAP in this year's BMC budget. I think when you look environmentally, all that money is now going towards air pollution. That's 2. So at what stage is the MCAP right now? What specific actions have been taken under the MCAP? And the third is, when you look at the coastal road, you're saying that, they've taken into consideration sea level rise, but when you look at the environment impact assessment of the coastal road, or even EIA reports for the MTHL project, or EIA reports for the BVSL project, you don't actually find any mention of sea level rise and how sea level rise projections can impact the security of these. I mean, even the IPCC has called the coastal road project maladaptive. So how do you reconcile your statement with these facts?
Too many questions, but I'll go by the sequence. So the first question is, I fully 100% believe in science. So science has given me the capacity to say science is not exact science, right? So, yeah. So when you don't know, you can't predict the future, okay? So that's why whatever the models, all these researchers run, there is nothing wrong with the models, but there is always an uncertainty element. So if you ask him, he will say, definitely my confidence level of my model is this much. Okay, so it is 98%, 99%, for social science 90%. There is always an uncertainty. Till that uncertainty is there, you are not exact science, you are not exact, it's not exact. So, but if you have to understand limitation, move forward. So that is first thing. Second thing you said about is, BMC has made lots of budget provision in different departments. We have more than 35 departments, right? For example, I am heading the stormwater drainage department. So we have spent last year 1,200 crores. This 1,200 crores, the majority amount is spent towards flood management. So I can tag directly everything climate change, or I can spend, then I can collate and present a different budget, which we are planning to do, because we are spending about close to 55,000 crores of rupees every year. And we have been spending huge amounts towards this climate change, right? But they are not specifically spelled out in the budget. So what we are planning to do is, we will call out all this expenditure and come out with a climate change budget from maybe next year onwards. That will be a supplement, we'll extract and submit. I think coastal road, like I said, I am not directly dealing with this. So I won't answer all your questions, but what I was made to understand is, all the climate change considerations, other things they have taken into consideration, and they ultimately gone up to the Supreme Court and won the case also. I think somebody has gone through the details and decided on this. Okay, thank you.
Just one last question.
No, we have to stop. Sorry, we have to stop. Because we have to start another session, and thank you so much.
This was indeed a very, very informative panel discussion. Therefore, on behalf of all of us seated here, I'm going to thank all the panel members, our esteemed speakers, for sharing their professional expertise with all of us. Let us give them a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Just before we move into lunch, I request Ms. Nandini Dias, Governing Board Member, Mumbai First, to please join us on stage. As a token of our deepest gratitude, I request Ms. Dias to kindly hand over a token of our appreciation to our speakers. Can we have the mementos on stage, please? What we would like to present our speakers is a beautiful piece of artwork that celebrates the invaluable connection between Mumbai's mangroves and the indigenous communities that they support. This artwork has been created by the young Mumbaikars under the campaign titled Make Art for Mumbai's Mangroves. We have partnered with the Ministry of Mumbai Magic for these mementos, which is a city-wide progressive youth climate community that believes that young people are not just the face of Mumbai's future, but they are equal stakeholders of its present. This community is incubated at the Purpose Climate Lab in India. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for all our panel members once again, please. We sincerely hope each and every one of you seated here is going to be taking home something of value from this panel discussion.